going to invite Sue and Ruth, if you want to take your places, and I'm going to invite Bethan, who's going to come and read some scripture to us from the book of Amos and the book of Matthew.
This is Amos 15, 21 to 25. I despise your festivals, and I take no delight in your solemn assemblies. Even though you offer me your burnt offerings and grain offerings, I will not accept them. And the offerings of well-being for your fatted animals I will not look upon. Take away from me the noise of your songs. I will not listen to the melody of your harps. But let justice roll down like water and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. Matthew 21, verses 12 and 13. Then Jesus entered the temple and drove out all who were selling and buying in the temple, and he overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who sold doves. He said to them, "It is written, 'My house shall be called a house of prayer,' but you are making it a den of robbers."
Do you know, I love singing and playing my violin in a worship group in my church too. But look at this. God is actually not interested in how beautifully we play or whether we sing in tune if we are also not on the right side of justice and righteousness. So you've got 10 seconds to turn to your neighbour and define the word righteousness. Okay, would somebody like to shout what they think righteousness means? Somebody shout what they think it means. Yes, doing the right thing. Yeah, doing the right thing. And but I'm thinking maybe it also needs a motivation behind there. So maybe it's doing the right thing out of love. That's how I would describe it. And so let's get on to why, as Christians, we care for creation. We do it because we are called to be righteous and we are called to do the right thing out of love. We all know Jesus' parable about that he gave in response to who is my neighbour, the Good Samaritan. This is his practical example of what it means to love. And I have often been given the privilege of explaining to judges and juries why I have taken action that appears to be against the law of the land. And I tend to refer to this parable, and I explain that for me, taking peaceful, direct action on climate and nature is simply doing the right thing by not walking by on the other side of the road. So let's look at the problem. This is my hometown, Monmouth, last weekend, when the River Monnow flooded. And this high street is rather appropriately named Monnow Street. We know the record-breaking floods and fires and hurricanes. We know they are not natural disasters. And we know they are driven by fossil-fueled climate change. And we should feel angry. This should make us angry, right? These people in Indonesia were not responsible for the fossil fuels that caused that flood. It was people in the first world, in the global north, in the industrialized world, which was, of course, started by this country. So we should be angry with ourselves. And we know, don't we, that going about our ordinary lives, we are burning those fossil fuels. So how can we carry on our lives, embedded as we are in a fossil-fueled economy, and at the same time live righteously? And I have just 2 more slides before I pass to Sue to answer that question. So I'm not going to ask you because we need to be quick. But there's very, very black areas of that map. Have a think about what they might be. Yes, they are where it's too hot currently for people to live. Too hot for human habitation at all. And the next darkest areas, that is where it will be too hot for people to live at just 3 degrees global warming, which is where we are heading if we don't get our act together. Think about the number of people living there. Look at West Africa. Look at where the Amazon rainforest is. And that is why I think we must act out of righteousness, because it's not about stopping dangerous climate, just about stopping dangerous climate change anymore. It's simply about loving our neighbour and responding to their suffering with solidarity. And the next time someone tells you it's too late, there's nothing we can do, remember 3 things. Firstly, every 0.1 degree of 0.1 of a degree less warming means less damage and fewer deaths. And think about the Good Samaritan. Did he know that the man he rescued would survive? And if he thought he'd probably had it, would he have left him by the side of the road? And whatever happens, it will never be too late to do the right thing. And who knows what God can do with that. And my last slide goes to Wendell Berry before we move to Sue, and I'm going to have to put my glasses on to read it. So we don't have the right to ask whether we are going to succeed or not. The only question we have a right to ask is, what's the right thing to do? What does this earth require of us if we want to continue to live on it? And over to Sue.
Thank you, Ruth. So, it seems to me that God has done us the supreme honor of calling us into life at this unique moment in the history of his creation. And he has given us a profoundly important role to play. He's asking us first to understand what's happening to the planet, and then to do all in our power to act to slow it down. The climate crisis is a crisis of justice and truth, requiring the gift of the whole of ourselves for God, so that he can use us in the struggle against the self-serving and truth-obfuscating preoccupations of the fossil fuel industry and the governments, including our own, that are persuaded and bribed and intimidated into believing that we can continue business as usual and continuing our own comfortable life of plenty and ease, because compared with most of the rest of the world, that is how we live. By contrast, Christians are called to follow Jesus into sacrifice, following him on the way of the cross, and we are called into resistance to evil. It's what we all signed up to at our baptism. And I was only 3 months old when I was baptized, but being in the Baptist church, you just take the initiative for yourselves, don't you? And for some Christians, this will mean following Jesus himself. And many in the early church and throughout history, and remembering the great Baptist minister Martin Luther King, of course, remembering that they were called and have been called into civil disobedience. Turning over the tables in the temple, one might say, and calling out the evil of the system, the monetary system and all the rest by which we're surrounded, that is carrying us and causing us to create the breakdown of the planet, the loss of the many mammals and animals and species of all kinds, the loss of the forests, the loss of the life of the oceans, all this great loss, the climate and the nature crisis that we, human beings, are causing. Every previous movement of social change has required this radical edge, some people being prepared to even go to prison if need be, to get change to happen. We don't know how it works. We don't even know if it does always work by any means. But that's not our business as Christians. Our business is obedience to what we perceive God is calling us to do, whatever it takes, whatever the cost. St. Peter put it starkly, didn't he, in the Acts of the Apostles, chapters 4 and 5. I quote, "If we must choose between obeying God and obeying human beings, we must always obey God. And that will sometimes, as it did for Jesus, involve breaking the law." As always, when God asks something hard of us, the rewards are immense. The literal handing over of ourselves into the hands of the police at the moment of arrest, the simple dependence on God for all that comes next. We don't know what's going to happen. The joyful knowledge that we have, as St. Francis, the author of that great hymn we sang at the beginning, St. Francis put it, we neither asked for nor received any reward, save that of knowing that we've done God's will. What more could we possibly ask for? When Christians attest to the way in which many Christians attest to the way in which engaging in civil disobedience for the sake of the gospel is a moment of intense enlivening of their spiritual life. And John Deere, the American Roman Catholic priest and activist, describes it as a graced high point of one's life. I'd hoped that there might have been some books by him coming, but they will come eventually, and you might be able to buy one and read about what he says. So, what is God asking of you now, members of the One Church in Brighton? This is where we come to it, isn't it? A few ideas. For sure, he wants you to be outraged at the trashing of his beautiful creation. Of course he does. And then passionate about taking action on its behalf. Are you? Are you going to be? Are you now? This is the question. This is all you need to think about today. For sure, he's wanting you to pray now with all your heart for his beautiful creation. And especially right now at this moment, as COP30 comes to the end, to pray that the leaders of the world will not be sidetracked and bribed and bamboozled by the fossil fuel industry, as they have been all the previous COPs, and will instead take the hard decisions required to reduce the carbon and methane emissions now, urgently, without any prevarication, and, of course, to pay reparations to those countries who've already suffered the most because of what we have caused, mainly us in the global north. For sure, he is wanting you to put all your effort right now, you need to do it today, into stopping the opening up of an immense new oil field in the North Sea called Rosebank. How many people have heard of Rosebank? Not that many. It's amazing to me. A few more than when I asked this question last weekend at another church I was at. The UK government is being tempted to turn away from its firm commitment to ending the use of fossil fuels and certainly not opening up new fossil fuel banks that are destroying the planet, and they're going to succumb, if we're not very careful, to the temptation of a quick financial fix.
There's leaflets at the back about Rosebank.
Plenty of stuff here to look at afterwards. Time is very short for us to prevent this lunacy. They've had a consultation about it, which has come to an end, but there's still time for us to write to our MP and to say, please, please, for the sake of our children, the sake of our grandchildren, the hundreds and millions of tons of carbon that will be released by the opening up of this oil field is absolutely crazy. Contact your MP and let them know your views. For sure, God is wanting you to switch your investments and your banking choices away from those that support the fossil fuel industry. Perhaps you're not aware that all the big 5 banks support the fossil fuel industry. So if you are banking with one of the big 5 banks, however much good you are trying to do for the planet in growing your own food and doing your recycling and all of the things that we need to do, eating less meat, it's all a waste of time. If you keep banking with Barclays and NatWest and Lloyds and HSBC and whatever the other one is. You need to switch to an ethical bank. It's the best thing you can do, actually, in terms of your Christian discipleship in relation to the care of creation. And it's such a simple thing to do, because what we do with our money is a powerful act of discipleship. And for sure, God is wanting you to examine your lifestyle, your dietary choices, and moving away, hopefully, from animal products. There are probably not many people here who are going to walk out today being a meat eater and decide to become vegan overnight, but you could cut down on the amount of meat and fish that you eat. Some people do things straight away, don't they? How do you heat your home? How do you travel? Perhaps using your car less and public transport more. All these things, and helping each other to do it. We can help each other to make those sorts of choices. For sure, God wants you to engage with the political system and try to persuade the political parties that the crisis and nature crisis is the only show in town. Nothing else matters by comparison with this. If we haven't got a planet, there's nothing else that matters really, is there? And for sure, God wants you to stand up and be counted, giving a prophetic witness in your church here, your place of work, your school, your places of recreation, amongst your neighbors, your friends, and within your family. All that is costly stuff. Just talking to people about this emergency is costly stuff. You may lose some friends. God may even ask you to get out on the streets and join Christian climate action and disrupt business as usual there. A kind of shock tactic, if you like, to wake up the world which is sleepwalking into oblivion. God has given us Christians some special tools to use during our short lives here on earth, the tools of loving commitment to our neighbor above ourselves. So we do what we do, whatever the cost, whatever it takes, trying to make ourselves less important in these arguments. Following God in his own yearning for justice and truth, and his own courage shown by Jesus without measure to do what needs to be done. So let's use them.
We're going to have some questions that you can give to these lovely people. That's such a challenging message, isn't it? I find it so hard and yet agree with every word. And what are our questions, practical or ethical or otherwise, that you might have? So think about those. I'm going to ask you a question just to get things going. Is that okay? Can you tell us about the first time you ever did a kind of direct action or a protest, and knowing that it might lead to trouble or make life more difficult for you? Was there a sort of seminal kind of first moment that you could tell us about?
Well, the very first time was when I was at theological college, actually, and that was to do with the peace movement. But in terms of the climate protest, I know exactly when it was. It was on Maundy Thursday in 2019, when the big get-together in central London, you remember, Extinction Rebellion, thousands of people, and wonderful weather, and it was a sort of, jamboree really. But the moment came when we were sitting down in the streets and we had to make that decision because the police came, and they usually give you a 5-point sort of thing about, they'll have to arrest you if you don't move. And that was the moment of decision. And what went through my mind when I was taken off by the police and into the police station was, this was the very day that Jesus was arrested. This was the day he was taken into custody, into the high priest's house. And what an honor for me to be following him on this day.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions ready that you'd like to ask? Yes.
A lovely talk. Thank you both. What is the most fun or the funniest action you have ever both done?
There's the banana story, isn't there? One of the banana stories.
I didn't hear the question.
What is the funniest time of arrest? There was a moment when, was it Insulate Britain or just about Insulate Britain people were, as a way of protesting the way the courts were treating peaceful protesters, we were gluing ourselves to the courtroom. And Sue and I decided to do this at a magistrate's court. Was it Stratford? And so Sue was being tried, and they found her guilty. And so we both glued ourselves to the court desk, to where we were sitting in the court. And of course, when you do these protests, you do it. One of the main reasons you do it is to try and get the message across, to try and tell the truth about the seriousness of the situation, and that the government and the society is not responding. And of course, so when the policeman came in and looked at Sue and said, "Can you tell me why you're here?" Of course, Sue just said, "Well, thank you for asking." "Do you have any children?" And then she proceeded to give a little sermon about why she was there and what we were doing. That was very...
Which is a lovely opportunity, isn't it? Because the police always have a body camera on, so you can tell them about climate crisis and what they should be doing, and if they've got children and grandchildren.
Exactly, yeah.
That's great. We skipped over the banana story, but mate, we'll leave that to your imagination. Any other questions?
I find that often when we talk about the climate crisis, we talk about it in the future, especially when we're talking about kids. It's affecting our kids' future. And in my studies, I read the State of the World's Children report from UNICEF, and they actually say the climate crisis currently is a direct violation of children's rights, multiple children's rights, and it's affecting them today and now. And that really put a fire in my bonnet personally. But my question is, how do we stop talking about the climate crisis as something that's going to be happening in the future, which is very abstract for us to think about, and something that's happening now, it's affecting people now, and it is violating children's rights, but also potentially human rights as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think actually this righteousness thing and justice is part of that, because I think it's not just me that's really motivated simply by solidarity. So if you know people are dying now because of stuff you have done 30 years ago, basically it takes 30, this is the thing, it takes 30 years for the carbon we put into the atmosphere to affect people now. But yes, so it is, if you talk about it, what is doing the right thing, if you imagine looking at those people suffering now while you are driving your car or turning on the heating or not sitting in the road or whatever, you can do it because of solidarity with them. Basic response to how they are suffering with love, I suppose. So yes, talk about it from how do you respond? It's not about saving the world, it's about responding to the suffering that's happening now. Yeah. Sue, any answers? Better answers than that?
I didn't entirely hear the question again.
The question was about what can we do to persuade people that the crisis is now, rather than a more abstract, if we don't do something it will be awful in the future. It's awful for people now,
yes.
And how do we reflect that best?
Yes. Well, of course, it will become, I suppose, easier in a sense, in that, the floods in Monmouth brought it home. Though I have to say, I was speaking to the Monmouth Diocesan Synod on that day, and I completely didn't relate to this crisis that was happening until later on. I thought, gosh, here we are in our very own backyard, this is happening. But it will become more evident, I suppose. The very hot summer we've just had. Of course, the first reaction of everybody is to say, how lovely, isn't it? We've had a lovely summer and we don't have to go abroad on our holidays. But gradually, I think talking about people's grandchildren is very important, because have we got little ones here now in their special place? They're outside, are they? Yes, okay. I'd just be a bit careful of saying this, otherwise. I mean, the little ones have no future unless we can turn this around. It's too late, I think, I think the received wisdom is that it is really too late to do many things, but it's not too late, as Ruth pointed out, to stop suffering, even by stopping 1 degree or less than a degree of heating. But somehow we have to try to get over to people that it's that serious. And it's a very difficult knife edge to walk, isn't it? Because saying that can make one so depressed that one says, as somebody I was staying with last week said, I know it's awful, but what can I do about it? So I might just well go on playing golf and having my central heating on and going out to dinner, because she said, what can I do about it? But that's never an answer for us as Christians, isn't it? Is it? And actually the point is that we can do, even the small things we do count in this, and they motivate us to do bigger things. I think that's the other side of this. And all this is contagious. We form what Martin Luther King called the beloved community, and we inspire each other. We do things that we thought we couldn't do, and we think we must do these because Blogs over there is doing it, so if he can do it, I can do it. Those sorts of things that we help each other to do. And it's all a sort of combination of these things, I think, that gets people to act. We must get people to act and do it now.
And can I just butt in, because I know we're running over time, aren't we? And you might prevent another question. There's lots of stuff at the back, in that back table, And there's Christian Climate Action stuff, which is the more direct action stuff. There's Green Christian that I also work for that's got some really good leaflets. And if you take one of the leaflets, then you sign up for our newsletter, which tells you sort of the latest. I always have just one thing, thanks to Michael Mosley, at the top, so you don't feel that there is a ream of things to do, but there is just one thing I put at the top every time, which is the latest thing that's happening to get involved with or do or whatever. And there's also stuff on Rosebank and stuff on the Big Bank Switch, which is the way of switching banks. So do help yourself to anything at the back. Thanks.